Khorne here, and today I will be showcasing some of the best units and army compositions that the Empire has available to them. Now, how I determined which units are good and which aren't is by how well they perform on both the campaign map and the battlefield. So things like how much they cost, how much you can boost them with technologies and skills available to every single Empire faction, how long it takes to recruit them, then seeing how strong they are on the battlefield, and then comparing them to other units within the Empire's roster. First, let's begin by explaining what are the strengths and weaknesses of the Empire. And many of you might already know that the Empire is a combined arms faction, meaning that they are a jack of all trades faction but master of none. This means that if you were to bring an army exclusively comprised of melee infantry against a primarily melee-focused faction, such as the Warriors of Chaos, you would suffer a humiliating defeat. Still, there is an area of combat where the Empire does excel, and that is with their range infantry, artillery, and war machines. As such, your melee infantry are primarily going to be there to hold the line, and your range units are there to kill the enemy. With Cavalry, it is a bit more complicated. While Cavalry isn't as useless as it once was for the Empire, it still isn't the best unit you can bring to the battlefield, but more on that later. Now let's take a look where we would rank all of their units based off of that. As with the Dawi units, I will be ranking them in 5 different categories. Doomstack worthy, where these units are ridiculously strong and can be made unstoppable. Bread and butter, these units are the units you should have as the backbone of your army. Situational units, units that aren't meant for every situation, but can be very useful in certain situations and against certain enemies. Expendable trash, these units are there just to die and buy your other units time to dish out damage. And actual trash, where I would just recommend you not recruit these units. Alright, let's start out with the melee infantry, and I would rank all of their spears as expendable trash. Because they are cheap, they hold the line decently well, and they're not really worth a lot in terms of balance of power. Except for the State Troops version, which can be quite good at holding the line, so I will be placing them at bread and butter. Every swordsman, halberd and greatsword unit though, I will place as actual trash, as these units are decently valued in terms of balance of power, but will disappoint you in every situation where you expect them to perform and kill enemy units. Now, Flagellants I will place as situational, even though in my opinion they aren't that good unless they are in Volkmar's faction. But if you need an emergency unit, especially against terror-causing enemies, they can help you out quite a bit. Next, let's talk about their range units, and here I would pretty much place everything besides the archers as bread and butter. All of their range units perform exceptionally well and can be boosted by a decent amount via technologies, skills, and traits, especially your gunpowder units. Get the crossbows for the early stages of your campaign, and then after finishing the associated technologies, guns become much better. As for the archers, I will place them as expendable trash, because even though they are very easy to recruit, they get outclassed very early on because of their short range, low damage, and low combat stats. So they aren't gonna be useful for long. Personally though, I find Free Company Militia to be a really good early game unit to recruit instead of archers, as they have decent melee stats and a ranged attack that can help you kill very high value units early on. They might not be a tier 0 unit, but they only require a tier 1 building, so they aren't that difficult to get. Next we have Cavalry, a very divisive topic, but the best cavalry unit in the Empire's roster has to be the Knights of the Black Rose, and they will go into the Doomstack category, simply because of the landmark located in Nuln that gives these knights Iron Resolve, which makes them basically unkillable so long as they don't fall below half health. Next we have Reiksguard, who will be going into the bread and butter category, as they are decently strong and perform much better than you would expect. Situationally good are going to be the Empire Knights, as even though they aren't the best cavalry unit there is, you can get them fairly early on, and it only takes 1 turn to recruit them. As for Demigryphs and Knights of the Blazing Sun, I would say they're all just trash and would recommend you not recruit these. The Demigryphs are simply too expensive and are probably the worst monstrous cavalry unit in the game. When it comes to their Elector Count variants, I would say they are all situational and are best used in emergencies. Then we have the Skirmish Cavalry and War Wagons. When it comes to the Pistoliers, I would say they are somewhat situational, bordering trash because of how inefficient they are with their ammunition. However, Outriders and Outriders with grenade launchers are both going to be your bread and butter units. Regular Outriders, so long as you put them in an army led by a Hawkland Scopes general, are very good units to have when going up against most of your early game melee-focused enemies, such as the Vampire Counts, Greenskins, Warriors of Chaos, Ogres, and so on. By increasing their range, you can put quite a bit of distance between yourself and all of the melee enjoyers and just demolish them from far. Grenade launchers are also amazing at deleting enemy infantry units, but in my opinion, the Borderman and Amethyst grenade launchers are much better than the base version. And if you can, I would start getting them as soon as you're able to. As for War Wagons and War Wagons with mortars, I consider both to be trash tier, simply because the Skirmish Cavalry, in my opinion, is much better and cheaper, so I see no reason to recruit these two units. Finally, Artillery and War Machines. Going from top to bottom, in the doomstack category, we have steam tanks and land ships. Now, previously, I have stated how steam tanks don't dish out as much damage as they should, and how they are easy to kill from both range and melee. But since the Thrones of Decay update, steam tanks actually perform like a tier 5 unit should. While not that amazing at dishing out damage from range, they finally feel like they're good to use in melee, as they now act like chariots and mow down the enemy infantry. So even though they take an eternity to recruit and are very costly to maintain, I would say they are well worth it. Same goes for the land ships. For your bread and butter units, well, there is only one, and it is going to be the Hellstorm rocket batteries. And I don't think I have to explain why. For the situational units, I would put the cannons and the Luminarchs of Hysh. Now, mind you, they both have the same job, which is to kill large single entities, and I know that the Luminarch has a AoE ward save, but please realize this, it's not that good. If you aren't gonna blob your units, the area of effect has very little impact on your army. So I would say they both bring equal value, maybe a little bit in the favor of the Luminarch. Now, the Luminarch is better at dealing with units that have high physical resistance, and the cannon is just better overall. As for mortars and Hellblaster volley guns, I honestly think both are quite bad. Mortars are honestly a very low impact artillery piece, and it is only gonna be good when you need a siege attacker for sieges. And volley guns, I feel, are rather very lackluster, especially when compared to the Hellstorm rocket batteries, which are in the same tier. And that is it for the tier list. So when it comes to building your armies, let's first start out with your lords and heroes. There are really only two lords you will ever need, the Master Engineer and the General of the Empire. Master Engineers are very powerful when it comes to leading range-focused armies by going for Ballistics Instructor, and they can still get the Hawkland Scope trait to boost their gunpowder units just a tiny little bit. Generals of the Empire now have a unique line that boosts their armies by quite a bit, especially the cavalry. Now, when it comes to Huntsman Generals and Arch-Lectors, well, Huntsman Generals get outclassed by Master Engineers, and Arch-Lectors are rather very outdated. They were not touched at all during the Thrones of Decay, so I would recommend you avoid recruiting them. Next, when it comes to heroes, you should always aim to have at least one Battle Priest, Engineer, and a Spellcaster in your armies. The best Spellcasters for me are Lore of Life and Lore of Light. As for the actual army compositions, the first type of army I like to build are Outrider heavy armies. Outriders are unfortunately no longer a viable late game doomstack, as CA hates fun and doesn't want you to enjoy their game. RIP Hawkland Scopes. But they are still decently strong in the early stages of a campaign, especially against slower moving factions like, for example, the Vampire Counts, which are basically your next door neighbors. Now, when it comes to this type of army, you will need to be very careful when fighting battles, as if the enemy has fast units, you can get easily caught in melee and lose a majority of your forces. Going a safer route and having only half of your forces be Outriders and the rest be melee infantry makes it so you have an easier time fighting battles, as you will be able to split your enemy's attention and won't have to micro as many units. The downside to doing it this way though is the fact that melee infantry will always take massive casualties, and since you will have less killing power, you will have a harder time actually winning battles. Attaching some Empire Captains and a Light Wizard will help you out a lot, as the Empire Captains, aside from giving your army bonus speed for the cavalry, can help with blobbing up the enemy around him, making it easier for your Outriders to dish out damage. Light Wizards are a very important part of these armies, as Net of Ammontok is extremely useful for holding the enemy in place and shooting them unimpeded. One is enough, but you can get two just to have an easier time fighting battles. Engineers are very important for these kinds of armies. 1 to 2 is usually enough, and it is also very important that these armies are led by a Master Engineer with Hawkland scopes for that extra range. Now, I prefer Outriders, but you can also go with Pistoliers. They are easier to use, but they will dish out less damage. This is because they very often overkill a single model and waste their ammunition. Why this doesn't get fixed but Hawkland scopes gets taken out the back and shot is honestly beyond me. Outriders with grenade launchers are also very beneficial for you to have in these armies, whether they're Amethyst, Borderman, or regular grenade launchers. But I wouldn't suggest getting more than 2 or 3 of them in a single army. As I said in the beginning, these armies are very useful for dealing with melee enjoyers such as Vampire Counts, Greenskins, and so on. But enemies that have a lot of range, like the High Elves, Dwarves, or enemies that have a lot of fast units like Bretonnia, you should avoid fighting with these kinds of armies, as you will have a very hard time winning battles against them. This type of army should last you through your entire campaign, so long as you're using it to fight the right enemies. Next, we have the sort of standard Empire army, which is very similar to the standard Dwarf army, where you have a front line of melee infantry that is designed to hold the line, while your range units dish out damage. Unfortunately, this type of army is much worse for the Empire than it is for the Dwarves. But the best you can make it is to have 4 Hellstorm rocket batteries, 6 ranged infantry units, crossbows early, handgunners or Ironsides late. You can also swap out some of them for long rifles if you wish, 5 spearmen with shields, and as for the lords and heroes, a master engineer to lead the army, a Lore of Light spellcaster, an Empire captain to boost your front line, a warrior priest to do the same as well as replenish your casualties, and an engineer to boost your ranged units. Now, if you're confident enough and have good items such as the Tormentor sword, you can just swap out your frontline units for more ranged units to dish out damage faster, and more heroes to hold the line. This is because if you do decide to bring no melee infantry, it will make the battles a bit tougher, but your army will also be much stronger and be able to take out tougher opponents. Finally, what you can do for this army type is to have steam tanks act as your front line and stop the enemy from reaching your range units. The upside for having steam tanks act as your front line is you will take less damage and will be able to heal them. But the downside is that the AI will in most cases just ignore them and charge at your back line. So you really have to be careful with this type of army, and don't forget to bring a life wizard as well. Next, we have cavalry heavy armies, and well, this is not the army type I would recommend you bring if you aren't amazing at microing your units. Now, cavalry at the best of times isn't amazing, but if you ever get outnumbered, the battles will become almost impossible to win, as you will get tied down and lose your mobility advantage. But if you are really interested in these types of armies, then just bring an Empire General and multiple captains to further boost your mobility, a Life and Light Wizard to heal your cavalry and slow down the enemy, and a Warrior Priest to replenish casualties afterwards. You can also, instead of having an entire army be cavalry, just make half the army melee infantry and the rest be cavalry. Same as with the Outriders though, this will make it so you have much less killing power, making your army weaker overall, but it will make it easier to micromanage. All of that being said though, there is a cavalry army that makes for a really good doomstack, and that is the unkillable Knights of the Black Rose doomstack. So what you will do here is, after building the Black Rose chapter house at Nuln and give Iron Resolve to all of your Knights of the Black Rose, place 4 life wizards in the army, which will increase the army's healing cap by 40%, making it so you can heal your knight units for longer, delaying their health from reaching below 50% and making them practically immortal. For a little bit more doomstack action, we have the steam tanks and landship doomstacks, which are both really good. You just need a life wizard to heal them. In fact, again, multiple life wizards would be best to increase their healing cap. Just don't place too many of them, as about 4 would be ideal. 1 or 2 engineers would be fine to boost their missile damage, a master engineer to lead the army, as with their skills and traits, they can lower the cost of these units and also reduce their recruit duration. As for a bit more of a specific and spicy doomstack, you can make the Greatsword doomstack for Karl Zog in France. Although I wouldn't recommend you do this, as it takes a long time to achieve, and it isn't at all practical to use. Just get 6 Empire Captains, a Battle Priest, a Spellcaster that can be Life, Light or Beasts, all are good options, and fill the rest of the slots with Greatsword units. The Empire Captains are there to provide your melee infantry with 3 melee attack and melee defense each, and the rest you can pretty much figure it out. This is easiest to achieve when playing Karl France, as he can basically replenish your Empire State troops every 15 turns. But instead of building this kind of army, I would honestly say just stick to your Reichsguard army for Karl France. Finally, when playing as Volkmar, Flagellants are actually insanely good. If you get the technology which reduces their upkeep cost by 50%, this makes it so you can spam waves of these units at low cost. And considering they're not at all weak on the battlefield, this can be quite a good boost for your campaign. But that is pretty much everything I can share with you when it comes to building up your Empire armies. If you enjoyed and would like to watch more of these videos, don't forget to subscribe for future content. Thank you all for watching, and until next time.
Khorne fights as one.